It's time for you all to wake up and shift your paradigm. This world is the kingdom of darkness, and we are living in its last days. It won't be long before the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. The heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat, and the earth and everything therein shall be burnt up. The Luciferian elite have been setting up the New World Order, and now they've established the globalist beast system for the rise of that wicked one and revealing of the man of sin who comes after the workings of Satan. Don't take my word for it. Read the Bible, and you'll know that perilous times shall come in the last days. And we are in the last days.
Welcome to the Matrix, where the numbers are a code, encrypting your perception so you can't access the node. Corrupted to the motherboard in every seed that's sown, keeping off from ever finding the info need not be known. Wake up to reality, start believing what you see. The earth's always been flat, get off the fences, trust your senses, feel the ground under your feet. See the eye level horizon, from earth up to sky at 10,000 feet.
The 18th century British royalty swallowed parts of the human body. The author adds that this was not a practice reserved for monarchs but was widespread among the well-to-do. In Europe, medicinal cannibalism, both Queen Mary II and her uncle King Charles II both took distilled human skull on their deathbeds in 1698 and 1685 respectively, according to Dr. Sui. Even as they denounced the barbaric cannibals of the New World, they applied, drank or wore powdered Egyptian mummy, human fat, flesh, bone, blood, brains, and skin. Moss taken from the skulls of dead soldiers was even used as a cure for nosebleeds, according to Dr. Richard Sugg at Durham University. Dr. Sugg said, the human body has been widely used as a therapeutic agent, with the most popular treatments involving flesh, bone, or blood, not drinking blood. Cannibalism was found not only in the New World, as often believed, but also in Europe. One thing we are rarely taught at school yet is evidenced in literary and historic texts of the time is this: James I refused corpse medicine, Charles II made his own corpse medicine, and Charles I was made into corpse medicine. Along with Charles II, eminent users or prescribers included Francis, Elizabeth Surgeon John Bannister, Elizabeth Grey, Countess of Kent, Robert Boyle, Thomas Willis, William III, and Queen Mary. The history of medicinal cannibalism, Dr. Sugg argues, raised a number of important social questions. He said, medicinal cannibalism used the formidable weight of European science, publishing, trade networks, and educated theory, while corpse medicine has sometimes been presented as a medieval therapy. It was at its height during the social and scientific revolutions of early modern Britain. It survived well into the 18th century, and amongst the poor it lingered stubbornly on into the time of Queen Victoria. Quite apart from the question of cannibalism, the sourcing of body parts now looks highly unethical to us. In the heyday of medicinal cannibalism, bodies or bones were routinely taken from Egyptian tombs and European graveyards. Not only that, but some way into the 18th century, one of the biggest imports from Ireland into Britain was human skulls. Whether or not all this was worse than the modern black market in human organs is difficult to say. This painting of Charles I's execution in 1649 shows people surging forward to mop up the former king's blood. It was thought to have healing properties. The book gives numerous vivid, often disturbing examples of the practice, ranging from the execution scaffolds of Germany and Scandinavia, through the courts and laboratories of Italy, France and Britain, to the battlefields of Holland and Ireland. Dr. Suggs said this was used to treat the king's evil, a complaint more usually cured by the touch of living monarchs. Over in continental Europe, where the axe fell routinely on the necks of criminals, blood was the medicine of choice for many epileptics. In Denmark, the young Hans Christian Andersen saw parents getting their sick child to drink blood at the scaffold. So popular was this treatment that hangmen routinely had their assistants catch the blood in cups as it spurted from the necks of dying felons. Occasionally, a patient might shortcut this system. At one early 16th century execution in Germany, a vagrant grabbed the beheaded body before it had fallen and drank the blood from him. The last recorded instance of this practice fell in 1865, whilst James I had refused to take human skull. His grandson Charles II liked the idea so much that he'd bought the recipe, having paid perhaps $6,000 for this. He often distilled human skull himself in his private laboratory. Dr. Suggs said, accordingly known before long as the king's drops. What's wrong with these people? It makes me want to throw up. This fluid remedy was used against epilepsy, convulsions, diseases of the head, and often as an emergency treatment for the dying. It was the very first thing which Charles reached for on February 2nd, 1685, at the start of his last illness, and was administered not only on his deathbed, but on that of Queen Mary in 1698. Now, if you thought that was strange, I'm going to show you something from our time that might just be the hidden link proving stuff like this still happens to a degree.
Could the secret to eternal youth be found in blood transfusions from young people?
Transfusions with young blood from teenagers, some claim it can reverse the aging process. It's being tested in patients over the age of 35 as part of a clinical trial called ambrosia.
By the way, ambrosia is an ancient drink, usually of blood, that is said to grant immortality to all who drink it. It was known as the drink of the gods,
where people paid $8,000 to get the rich growth factors found in blood plasma platelets.
It's pretty much people from most states, people from overseas, from Europe and Australia.
Results of the trial have not been published, but Dr. Jesse Karzeman, who plans to open a business selling young blood, says patients who've had it say they feel amazing. And he says he's seen evidence of reversing the aging process in rats.
Their brains are younger, hearts, their hair, if it was gray, just turns dark again.
There's also been encouraging Alzheimer's research using young blood at Stanford.
We found that it was safe and feasible to administer infusions of young plasma weekly.
Dr. Sharon Shaw is a researcher who says they've seen evidence of improvement in functional ability.
It's all very exciting that there can be components in blood that could be healing.
Platelet-rich plasma, or PRP, treatments using a patient's own blood have been in demand as trendy vampire facials to fight wrinkles and as joint and tissue treatments to accelerate healing. And it's been tested to regrow hair.
We can actually use your own blood to stimulate the body.
The study hasn't concluded, but seeing enough short-term results, the researcher is optimistic.
After Christianity took back Spain from the Moors in the 14th century, they wanted to root out all non-Catholic elements in the country and unite it under Catholic rule. The church demanded that hundreds of thousands of Jews convert or leave. Many Jews agreed to convert, and they became known as conversos. The slang or derogatory term given to those who were not totally sincere in their conversion was marranos, which means pigs. They openly followed the Christian faith, but covertly held true to their former identity and agendas in secret. They intermarried with the nobility and rose to the highest ranks in government and the church. And according to Jewish-born author Dr. Henry McCall, and I quote, "They pretended to belong to a target group But like the Freemasons, they had handshakes to recognize each other, and they met in secret at night. The founder of the Jesuits was a converso, and so was his successor. The Society of Jesus, as the Jesuits were formerly known, was started in the 1530s by Ignatius of Loyola, and he was a Basque soldier who compiled a series of esoteric spiritual exercises, which, when performed, they were performed by all of the male order, and there are no Jesuit sisters. So these spiritual exercises consist of mental exercises, meditations, prayers, and other practices which were designed to improve a person's spiritual vitality. Another way of expressing this spiritual or universal force is the Asian term ki or chi. In India, one might come across the word prana, which is said to be controlled through breath and posture and the various forms of yoga. Prana is the Sanskrit word for life force. Vril is another name of this life force energy that theoretically fills the universe and all living beings. Helena Blavatsky, the foundress of the Theosophical Society, described this Vril energy as an ether stream that could be transformed into a physical force. The Vril Society was a secret organization in Germany devoted to mastering this unseen force of nature. They accumulated and combined the guarded alchemical knowledge of this life force that's contained in Sufism, Aryan Hindu mysticism, Theosophy, Nordic and Sumerian mythology, pagan sex magic, channeled material, and the Kabbalah. According to esoteric and yogic teachings, sexual energies can be channeled, stored, and harnessed. And Tantra and Kundalini Yoga were two ancient techniques utilized by the German Vril Society. After fleeing Germany in 1933, Dr. Willy Ley, one of the world's greatest rocket experts, said, and I quote, "The Vril Society, which formed shortly before the Nazis came to power, believed that they had secret knowledge that would enable them to change their race and become equals of the men hidden in the bowels of the earth. Methods of concentration, a whole system of internal gymnastics by which they would be transformed. These methods of concentration were probably based on Ignatius Loyola's spiritual exercises. The Jesuit techniques of concentration and visualization are similar to many occult teachings, especially in shamanic cults and Tibetan Buddhism. The Nazis revered these Jesuit spiritual exercises, and they believed that they had been handed down from ancient masters of Atlantis. The occultists of the time knew that Ignatius was a Basque. Some claimed that the Basque people were the last remnant of the Atlantean race, and the proper use of these techniques would enable the reactivation of the Vril. The belief was that the world will change and the lords will emerge from the center of the earth unless we have made an alliance with them and become lords ourselves. We shall find ourselves amongst the slaves on the dung heap that will nourish the roots of the new cities that will arise. Nestled in the mountains between France and Spain, there's a semi-isolated population of native European people that have long puzzled anthropologists, linguists, and historians, because although they are Caucasoid, they do not fit in with the rest of the European population. Their language, for example, is distinctly unique in Europe and not related to any other Indo-European language. But that's not the only thing that's unique about the Basque. The Basque turned out to also be unique in terms of blood. Prior to the advent of genetic research tools, investigators used the ABO blood groups to study the relationships between human populations as well as their migration patterns. Each person's blood is one of four major types: A, B, AB, or O. Blood types are determined by the types of antigens on the blood cells. Antigens are proteins on the surface of blood cells that can cause a response from the immune system. The Rh factor is a type of protein on the surface of red blood cells. Most people are Rh positive. Those who do not have the Rh factor are Rh negative, which compromises about 15% of the world's population, but appears in much higher percentage among the Basque, which as a population contain among the highest levels of Rh negative blood in the world. But exactly who are the Basque and where did they come from? I decided that a great place to find out is the University of Nevada, since it houses the Center for Basque Studies. This organization is primarily a research center that conducts and publishes on Basque-related topics such as anthropology, history, cultural studies, etc. Here's what they had to say about the Basque people and their origins, and this comes from their website's frequently asked question. Question: where did the Basque come? No one knows exactly where the Basque come from. Some say they are descended from the original Iberians. More fanciful theories exist as well. One is that the Basque are the descendants of the survivors of Atlantis. Question: where did the Basque language come from? Just as no one is sure about the origins of the Basques themselves, linguists are not in agreement over the origins of Euskara, the Basque language, either. When asked, I found that the majority of the Basque people themselves maintain that they came from Atlantica, a powerful maritime nation that sank into the Atlantic Ocean after a terrible cataclysm, and from which a few survivors reached the Bay of Biscay and the Pyrenees Mountains. This, they say, is not just mythology, but their true pre-European ancestry. There's another ancient people who claim racial lineage from the mythical Atlanteans. The Berbers are currently located geographically around Mount Atlas, but inhabit much of North Africa long before the Arabs arrived. The Berbers are considered the aboriginals of the area, and their origins beyond that are not officially known. Here we have a population, many of whom have blue eyes and light hair, living in Northwest Africa of all places, and among some of the blonde tribes still living near the Atlas Mountains of Morocco, the percentage of Rh negative blood can reach 40%. Now keep in mind, that's not the general national average, but restricted to certain local tribes. Anthropologists, for the most part, dismissed them for many years because they didn't fit well with the out-of-Africa paradigm, so it was presumed that they had migrated from somewhere in Europe. However, that theory has been abandoned with the current understanding of genetics. Scientists now accept the genetic evidence that concludes Berbers are an indigenous people going straight back into the Pleistocene or Ice Age. This should make it easier to understand why the oldest remains found in Egypt, nicknamed Ginger, and currently on display in the British Museum, has naturally red hair. This is pre-dynastic, which means before the pharaohs and before the accepted dating of the pyramids. I can go on for quite some time about blonde and red-headed mummies and blue-eyed statues, but I'll save that for a future video on ancient Egypt. For now, let us turn to another population native to an island off of the African coast, who also left mummies and pyramids. The Guanches were very tall, powerfully built, blonde and red-haired indigenous natives of the Canary Islands, specifically the island of Tenerife. To date, there is still no evidence that the Guanches had any knowledge of maritime technology, which begs the question, how did they get there? This isolation allowed the Guanches to maintain a racial exclusivity until the time of the Spanish conquest. Madame Blavatsky, foundress of the Theosophical Society, points out that the genetic relations between these three populations, well over 100 years before a modern understanding of DNA, and I quote, she says, "If then the Basque and Cro-Magnon cavemen are of the same race as the Canaries Guanches, if Bolos of the former are also allied to the Aborigines of America, the Atlantean affinities of the three types becomes patent."